Welcome, everybody. This is Heart to Heart with Gary Reinhardt. I am here with former Speculator Village Mayor and Town Supervisor and owner of the Inn at Speculator, Neil McGovern. How you doing, Neil?
Doing well, Gary. Thanks.
That's good to hear. Neil has been here for what, over
39 years.
39 years. So we're coming up on the big 4-0.
Indeed.
All right. Um, so let's talk about your experiences here. Like I said, you used to be the mayor of Speculator. Mayor of Speculator.
Yeah. I was on the village board for a number of years as a trustee. Had some other positions prior to that on both the planning board and the zoning board of appeals. Eventually, an opening came up with my friend Cully Smith leaving the ranks. So I ran for and was a two-term mayor of the village of Speculator.
Oh, that's great. What were some of the things that you got to accomplish while you were mayor of Speculator?
We were sort of thrust into a really difficult decision, one that our whole board had to, I think, be unanimous on for me to move forward. We had, as you know, Oak Mountain, which is an important cog in our business for winter. In fact, should be for year-round. They'd been closed at that point then for the second winter because of financial difficulties. The Germains had put a lot of money and sweat and toil into building what they had there through the Novacell family. Unfortunately, a couple of bad winters and not enough snowmaking. The investments they had made were sitting idle. Came to me.
I'll be back in about a half hour.
Came to me as an opportunity through the IDA and the economic development of Hamilton County that perhaps communities here could save Oak Mountain through a joint venture.
And that's exactly what you guys did. Helped revitalize it until we found the owner, which is now Matt O'Brien.
Yeah. The town at the time was reluctant to get into what they thought might be a debt situation. I subsequently got the support of our village board, all five of us, and I wrote a letter to the probate court offering that we would be what they call a receiver, which is bankruptcy terminologies. The court agreed, and we were able to save or reinstitute 40 full and part-time jobs for the community, get our kids back in school programs that would teach them skiing and a lot of the fun aspects of tubing, etc. And it really did become a home run when we came upon, a few seasons in, a management team of Matt and Laura O'Brien to manage for us. And eventually they, through their family's investment, made a deal with the IDA.
Yeah, and it's been a great success ever since.
Private owners, lots of jobs. They have expanded some of the things that we'd hoped we'd see from that property for the summer months, for the summer and fall months. Lots of, as you know, a lot of other opportunities present themselves, not just lift rides to the top to see the view, but they've done mountain biking, they've done disc golf, they've attempted a number of things, and now have come upon a real good revenue source in weddings, sort of situational weddings where the ceremony's up at the top.
Yeah,
Nice.
About every weekend, actually, they've had weddings. All right, and then from there you moved on to become town supervisor.
Yes.
Of the town of Lake Pleasant.
I did. We always have worked well together as a village and town, and we were then too. I had some disagreements with our supervisor at the time, Frank Mazzano, on fiscal matters, on a little more equitable treatment for the village in the way that things were taxed for the village versus town. But then just some fiscal conservative items that I thought we needed to address. While still friends, I ran against Frank and won a narrow election, and I was there for 3 terms.
Mm-hmm. And what were some of the important steps you took when you were the town supervisor?
Well, what was apparent to me was that while we had a very good working crew, um, we were a little bit top heavy on payroll, a little bit top heavy on the amount of staff we had. Over my time there, we through mostly attrition, we removed 3.5 FTEs, full-time employees, uh, in as I say, attrition, some private contract work for cleaning, et cetera. And that kind of gave us the flexibility in our budgets to improve a great deal of our equipment, our trucks, and eventually a 5-bay new storage facility for those vehicles, including one heated wash bay, which has become really a vital thing for our equipment, and we offer it to the village, our town equipment, offer it to the village equipment, to the ambulance corps, and so on through wintertime to be able to defrost and clean your vehicles. There's some studies out that by covering your vehicles, giving them indoor uh, storage, and also cleaning them, getting the salt and sand and so on off of their frames, you can increase the life of these things 30 and 40%. So big investments that are saved.
Yeah, and the people at home can't see it, but outside it is snowing quite hard right now. So it's very good that we have those extra vehicles to help clear the roads and throw the salt and sand onto it. I know salt is kind of a controversial thing with people,
Hmm.
being that it does affect our vehicles in a negative manner, but at the same time, it keeps us safe from the ice.
Yeah. The village has basically a no salt policy for their roads, and again, those are mainly obviously side roads. The town has a fair amount of side roads as well. Very light salt and or sand is used on those, but since the town is also a contractor for our lengths of state highway around here for the state, we do have to adhere to their standards, which for the most part are a bare road policy. So they'll be at it quite a few more passes sometimes than we'll do on our local roads. And as you say, that's the ones where we're using a great deal of the salt. It is controversial. It's controversial because there are both environmental and certainly costs that are attributed to the rust and the rot that salt can do to frames for your vehicles, my vehicles, and certainly those big things, the school buses and the plow trucks that go around. These are all, ticket prices of 240,000 and up for many of these. So it's a big burden when you have to rebudget for those things. So we do try not to overdo it. Obviously, then there's runoff and what it does to vegetation on the sides of the roads. In some cases, potable drinking wells, and in all cases, some salinity going back into your fishery. So we're very mindful of it.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, and this was quite a long time ago, not that I'm that old, that the Fire Tower Pizza place had a situation where their water supply was tainted, if I'm correct, with
Sure.
salt.
Yeah. That was a storage issue. The county storage facility, which also stores a great deal of salt, as does the town facility for road use. Um, there was leachate that had, over many, many years, um, gotten down into an aquifer that fed a certain amount of homes, uh, personal wells, and that fire tower restaurants wells as well. And it ultimately led to that business closing, which was unfortunate. Um, that's been remediated. Uh, those homes all get their water directly from a very pure well up at the county center. But these things all have deleterious effects if you don't handle them correctly. Usually, it's an accumulated effect right over time, and that's something that folks can look the other way on and hope someone else will fix it down the road. We try to be more proactive now.
Oh, I'm very happy about that. When you see the town and village and the direction it's going, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I'd be lying if I didn't say I'm concerned particularly most recently with the tenor of the politics in our region, particularly our town. Um, it is not unusual for elections that are disputed, contested elections to get a little heated. But these ad hominem attacks and the things that divide us have been much more apparent this last couple of years. Um, and most of the time, it is from misinformation. I won't say lies as a rule. They're misinformation or misunderstandings where folks jump on those bandwagons and go off on tangents, trying to, assess blame. Um, Around here, our economy, as you know, Gary, is very, very closely linked to the outdoor recreation and tourism, if you will. I like to say that we're more of a second home owner-based community economy than maybe years ago when we were more tourist-related. Your family has long been involved at the campsites, and those campsites with the ebb and flow, constant comings and goings of new visitors have really been important, and that we used to call tourism. And it was same many cabin colonies, private cabin colonies around the Adirondacks, and specifically here in our chamber area, were vital. You're seeing less and less of that, and a whole lot more of statically owned, individually, privately owned homes, camps, as we call them. Those change the dynamic on where money is spent and how it circulates in an economy.
Do you think we've adapted well to the changing, as you said, from a tourism town to more of a second home type town?
In many ways, we have. There's a certain thing they call it when you do it in cities. They call it gentrification, where an area has an uptick in the costs of property, and in some cases, it's seen as a good thing. Because, oh, geez, richer people are moving in, and rising tides lift those boats. Rents go up, costs and the values of these properties go up. Well, we get a lot of that here in the same way. It has forced folks who used to be able to afford to live on our lakes to no longer live there, as the pressures and taxes have drove them to perhaps sell to others from somewhere else. It can have a good effect. I've seen over the last 25 years plus a great deal of interest by our second homeowners in the look and feel of our community, vis-a-vis garden clubs and plantings and flower pots and the bench program that was so successful, where folks would dedicate it to a loved one that came before them, etc. All good things. However, as our population, which of course we are the least populated county east of the Mississippi River and have been for 50 years, as our population, scant as it is, continues to diminish. We have over the last two censuses netted a 10% decrease in our population. When you start with 5,200 people in a space 1.5 times the size of Rhode Island, losing 10% of them is really, it can't be absorbed. Can't be absorbed in the things that matter, like how many children are in our schools, how many people are there to volunteer for our ambulance corps, for our local volunteer fire departments. So while most places are graying at their Lions clubs and auxiliaries, we are in dire, desperate need of more families who live here year-round. So the balance, I believe, now is out of whack.
Yeah, so you feel it's heading more towards people who have a second home here and less full-time people.
Certainly less full-time people, and there's always been a strong contingent of, as I call them, camp owners. It just now it is the scale has tipped further in that direction. So what happens is a great deal of folks who have the best intentions for our area still do not get to the core, the nub of what is one of our biggest problems, which is getting staff to work for the services that are needed, being able to pay decent wages for those services, and in fact, as I go back to our volunteers, our our next generations, our things for our young people to do. As you well know, trying to stay here where your grandparents and your parents stayed and lived gets increasingly harder because opportunities are increasingly diminishing. So what they don't seem to get, the second homeowner economy, is where and how people that are living here year round, how they make a living. We need growth in the tourism sector and in fact in light manufacturing as well.
Mhm. As you said, that nature is a big part of our appeal. It always has been, and we take great pride in our forests, our lakes, and even when you drive through the village of Speculator now, you've got the new light posts, the nice brick sidewalks. Um, do you think there's any way we can try and get back to the popularity we had, 20, 30 years ago?
Well, being here, as you say, almost going on 40, I always hearken back to 50 plus years ago to make comparisons on that tourist visitor and that economy. It's a competitive world out there. So being charming, being welcoming, being open to folks who travel through in hopes that they will stay, spend money, maybe put down roots, etc., is all very important. And I would never minimize it. I have been at the vanguard of promoting most of those things for many years. But to answer your question, to get back to some of the more vibrancy that has left us, I think we need to turn a corner, to understand that in a county such as this, and I mentioned how large it was prior, there has not been a brand new piece of hotel stock, that is to say, a rental room, built in Hamilton County since 1956. That's the same year I was born. So over 62 years, a few cabins have been built for transient rental, but not one hotel or motel room has been built in that period of time, basically twice your lifetime. Um, that's unsustainable. When folks, as they often do around here, get pride about their place where they come from, they speak of the heydays of the Speculator and Lake Pleasant areas, they often hearken back to those big hotels that were both magnets for visitors and obviously clusters for jobs. When you have opportunities, and we had one a few years ago here, where to build a new hotel could mean the first brick in that wall to build for the future. When you have folks who, for their own uh, interests, whatever they may be, they feel reason to get in the way of that. What it does is it sends a signal to investors for the future. This community may look welcoming to stop in and use the rest facilities or stay at our village beach for a few hours. This community is not forward and progressive thinking in ways of development.
And then we reference back to certain hotels that have tried to expand and have been shot down. Those were big controversies in their own right between both sides. I do remember during my mom's funeral, we have a lot of family in New Jersey, Wyckoff, and that area, and to see more than 75% of them had to drive all the way from Wyckoff up here. That's a 5-6 hour drive to come to the funeral and then drive another 5 to 6 hours because there is no place to stay. Especially it was February, so it's winter, so there's even less place to stay. It's disheartening to see that there's no place for the tourist to be
Lodging
to be a
facility.
tourist.
Yeah, they you pointed out before how it's snowing, and we've just come through a stretch of 12 to 13 days of below zero here. This is a difficult, somewhat some would say inhospitable region, certainly for sleeping outdoors. So the campsite that your dad runs, and so many that are vital to our economy around here for the summer and parts of fall, they are not options for the wintertime. So, should you have a family reunion, a memorial for a loved one, a wedding, or anything along those lines in the winter, you are truly at odds as how you're going to put these visitors up overnight or for a few days. Here in the inn, we have 4 rooms available for visitors who come and stay. There's Melody Lodge, there's Water's Edge has a couple. There's a couple of motels in town with less than 10 rooms each. This would not absorb a small bus, never mind a good size congregation of folks that come for any number of reasons. Take that, and then of course, those rooms would be rented should we have winter visitors for ski or snowmobile, and you see what I'm talking about. Even in summer, when there are literally hundreds, if not more than 1,000 places to camp, good sites, and cabins are more available, the beds in our area are at a net loss. In our chamber area, our overnight beds for transient visitors are at a net loss and continue each decade to go down for that census. This is not in any way, shape, or form a positive for an area that has so much to offer. Today, instead of interviewing here with me, you may be snowshoeing or ice fishing or skiing or any number of things that you like to do. And thank God the temperature's gone up a little bit where it's a little more comfortable outdoors to do that. But if you didn't live here, gosh, it's hard to imagine that you would come up and decide on these roads and slippery and snow, I'll make that as a day trip. Folks will brave it and stay for a few days should they be able to have decent hospitality beds available. We're just not there, and it's discouraging for a businessman like myself who has been at this and pushing for these growth issues for some time to see even a minority of our community be so vocal against that growth.
I know, like as you just mentioned, that you are a business owner. You own the Inn at Speculator, a place that has tons of history, not only in the building but even on the walls. We have the Rogues Gallery, and many famous photos of years past, such as the basketball team, Kate Smith, who famously sings "God Bless America" at Yankee Stadium.
Her recording does.
A record. No, she has long been passed.
She's, I believe, happily buried in Lake Placid. But
yes,
yeah, there's a lot of folks have come through here, and in fact come through our area. Famous Broadway and Hollywood people, certainly great athletes. The boxers have really put Speculator on the map over the many years since the 20s. Yeah, we're very proud of our here at the Inn Speculator, our little piece of history for Speculator. But I worry that without growth, without a mindset that is truly progressive in a way to develop more here, I'm afraid that we will, and you drive through them, we drive through them all the time, we will end up in another 10 or 20 or 30 years, we will be an afterthought or a place that used to have history.
Right. And as you mentioned, boxing was a big thing here. We even helped train a heavyweight champion at one point.
Sure.
Which we now name you. Were you the town supervisor when they named the park?
Yeah. Yeah. Originally I was on the village board when some really wonderful community activists, Dr. and Mrs. Fant, George Sherman, and others, acquired the Old Point, which is where the Osborne Inn, one of those truly famous venues, were. The Osborne Point became a wonderful public space across the street from our park and pavilion area and across the outlet from our historic village beach. So the Point Park was really getting a lot of play, and then this garden club that we were so fortunate to have spring up were doing great work in gussying that whole area up. Certainly the benches, picnic tables, a new dock came later. The LPSA was very helpful in getting the village money for that. So now all comes along another piece of property abutting to it, um, which was the exact site of where Mr. Osborne and his family kept the boxing ring, the one that would have uh, grandstands around it to watch any number of promising heavyweights train. From Gene Tunney, that started it all with old Bill Osborne, many others, Max Baer, Jimmy Slattery, many boxers through a 25-year period came through there. Well, there's that piece of property, and doesn't the community once again get together and raise over $200,000 to purchase it at really at the market rate from the owner at the time, and add on to that Point Park, which now that piece of the park is Tunney Park. So I was on a village board when we first got the Point Osborne Park, and I was town supervisor and was here for the dedication when the Tunney Park was added to it. All village parkland.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I always appreciated about this town, whether it is for the Lenna Foundation, Wounded Warrior, as you bravely jumped in the lake as the only brave soul
This year, yeah.
this year, is our ability to come together in times of trouble when someone has an illness or a family member has some sort of travesty happen against them. We come together in a way that you just don't see anywhere else.
No, I know there are other great communities. I'm very sure of it. I believe in human nature in general. But to your point, there's you never are cease to be amazed at how many times, it's not just once in a while, but how many times, over and over and over, this community comes together on, I'll say, small matters where I'm talking about raising a few $1,000s for everything from, things that happen thousands of miles away. We had a pancake thing here for Katrina, for crying out loud. I mean, going back some years ago, we raised thousands of dollars. Your family member was, had a birth where there was definitely an illness that could ruin this child for her life. Gosh, you folks put together a little Lenna Fund. Every place you put a bucket, every place you did anything, folks want to give. They want to help. Every small or large tragedy is met the same way. People come together in church basements and in inns and restaurants and at the convenience stores, talk about it and do something. A lot of action. Certainly, my wife had a long illness. People couldn't have been nicer. Couldn't have cards and donations. Just remarkable outpouring of love. In sometimes from folks that, quite frankly, I hardly knew.
Yeah, and speaking of your wife, unfortunately, she did pass away in March. We all loved Linda, and I remember talking to her many times, and she was always such a smart person and very insightful, and helped me get started where I am right now as an interviewer now, and definitely as a DJ. But she also helped around the community a lot.
Yeah, Linda and her mother, Ruby Price, were founding members of the Twigs. Linda could not give the same amount of time that some of her elders, some of the ladies in the community could, because we have a handicapped child at home and two other sons and a business to run. Certainly, Linda was one of those folks that was, unlike her husband, was quiet about the way she did things. I sometimes get on truly on a bandstand or a soapbox. Linda was quietly determined about the issues that she believed in, whether that was Prospect School in Glens Falls for one of the places my son had gone, or, as Gary mentions, around here in the community, here in the business after she was stricken with a brain tumor originally. This goes back at this point now 13 years ago or so. she didn't have the same presence here in the business that she once did, cleaning rooms and waiting on folks and being hostess, etc. But she never had stepped back from the impactful parts that I now do badly of the bookkeeping and the payrolls and the paying of the bills and etc. Those things which everyone knows are vital behind the scenes things she continued to do. So the business, of course, misses her. Our family just still remains reeling from her loss. But I will say this, folks continue. This is 9, 10 months ago. It was when Linda died. She died early in the morning on St. Patrick's Day of 2017. But here we are almost 10 months later, and folks still, I'll get notes and things over Facebook or emails of the impact she had. Many of them I was not even aware of for the gals and the young people here in the community. So yeah, it's been a great loss. But you know what? We count ourselves, I count myself lucky. We had over 40 years together, and most folks don't get that. So we're blessed.
Yeah, and we were definitely blessed to know her in the community, and as someone who had worked here for quite a while, we were
Yeah,
very
okay.
blessed to know her.
Yep. Thank you.
So we were talking earlier about the last election, and for those who aren't in the know, we had an infamous, and this is infamous for Lake Pleasant, mail out or pamphlet, as you may say, from the now current town supervisor, Dan Will, that seemed to put down a lot of people, and as you kind of mentioned, may have had some misinformation.
Yeah, when you send things out that both either have ad hominem attacks against people who are serving in your community, or misrepresent facts about what monies have been spent or budgeted, it tends to muddy the water. And I hate to say it, but sometimes that was the general intent. Um, this was something that we had never seen around here. Each of us who has run for office, and I've done so, gosh, almost a dozen times. Um, you send out circulars or postcards or whatever to keep your name in front of the voters, to give the positive spin on things that you either want to or have accomplished. This was not that, and it was taken, I think it was taken by a lot of folks to be below the belt. Betsy Bain, who at the time I think was the recipient of much of this vitriol, I've served with Betsy on snowmobile clubs that we both were in leadership roles in, other civic organizations, um, community action, etc. But most of all, I had 6 years together with her on the town board. Betsy's a business owner of impeccable character. The Oxbow Motel, certainly one of the cleanest and best run small operations here in our region. Uh, she was a tremendous resource for me as a councilwoman on that town board. And yet, folks saw the need to trash her and her reputation in order to achieve that post. I do feel that it was beyond the pale. I hope we're past it. There was a great deal of pushback from it, and maybe lessons have been learned. But, it's like everyone has said around here. This goes back to folks that were pilloried by others in front of congressional um, House committees. The man who eventually proved he was not a scoundrel asked, "Excuse me, Senator, where do I go to get my reputation back?" And that's what happens when you speak ill of folks, and it sticks, even in a few minds in a small community. How do I reclaim that? Do I have to go out and run some sort of campaign of self-congratulatory backslapping in order to regain it? I don't think you can. Over time, the only thing you can do is to conduct yourself professionally, ethically, with integrity, and hope that folks see and learn, perhaps, that they were wrong in their assessment. All that said, we do need to move forward. We do have a sitting town board. The supervisor, I believe, still is perhaps over his head, but that's not to say that the board can't help him. I'm sure there were many times when I was in leadership roles in government and other things where I was the last one to realize that I needed help. So I'm hoping that Mr. Wilk will accept help from both his constituents and from the now sitting town board.
As you said, you were a business owner here. You own the inn, and we're actually getting some people in right now, some snowmobilers
Yeah,
enjoying
thankfully.
the weather. You've mentioned to me a lot of times, a lot of favorite memories of being around here, and of course, the late great Mr. Patitucci was a big staple, especially in my mind. My dad always tells the story because Mr. Patitucci would eat at the end so often. He was always impeccably dressed with the coat, the suit, the tie, the hat. He believed for the longest time that he actually owned the restaurant because of just the standing he
It
had.
was not uncommon for folks who were occasional visitors to the inn to think just that. When it finally came to light with me, and a customer came up to me and said, you've been here a good long time. The owner must really love you. And I said, well, maybe you're speaking about my father-in-law. He was our senior partner. He's been gone for, oh gosh, many, many years. No. The old Italian gentleman walks around here with the coffee cup. I said, oh. I said, no, that's Mr. Patitucci. I said, he lives upstairs. I said, you've got it wrong. I'm the owner. Jimmy's the boss. And that was the way that Jimmy conducted himself. He was truly a Damon Runyon character who we were happy to have live upstairs under the moniker of the house detective for 20 years. I don't know if he ever detected anything other than, as I say, just walking about and adding color to our little inn here. But Gary, I think the memories I have that best exemplify my career here at the inn, our time together with family and friends and staff, are the events. The events that, as you say, a lot of them are littered on the walls around here. The parties, tiki parties and Halloween parties, the big events, the wacko races, the things that either raise money or just raise the spirits of the community over and over. We, for many years, had clam bakes and big picnics out back behind the inn prior to developing some of that land. These things are pictures, some of them on the wall, many of them in my memory. And we've had so many great, I keep saying friends and staff because they very much intermingle. Great times. I've got folks who grew up here, started as youngsters like Gary, pot walloping and helping out, and come back in a number of other capacities. Gary's sort of the house DJ now, but you look around. I mean, Johnny's been here for 17 years. Started when he's 14 years old. Dougie was here for 13 years. Now big shot in Whole Foods, and Brian Page has moved on to other jobs. So many young dishwashers and cooks that now have jobs that I'd have trouble getting. It's that sort of impact that stays with me because it's about people. In a community, it's about people, but certainly if you're in a people business, like hospitality as we have been, it's really about the folks, and boy, we've made a lot of great friends.
Yeah, and as you had mentioned, I had been here for about 7 or 8 years actually, from 2008 to 2016.
Chief of the China Clipper.
Chief dishwasher.
Yeah.
And as many people know, I still call you boss.
Sometimes old habits die hard.
They do die hard. And you mentioned all these events. They don't, but become kind of full circle. They don't really happen much anymore.
Yeah. When I remember a point, it's many years now ago, 20 plus, when we were, myself and a few other folks were at a function. It may have been a chamber dinner. And one of the old guard, one of the old leaders of the community, one of the ones who had organized so many darn things around here, was retiring, and another one had just passed. And we looked around. These were folks about my age, so they were probably mid-40s then. And they said, "Oh my God, we're the adults now. You know, we need to step up. We need to take the mantle." And so we tried. A number of us tried to do that with throwing these big events and the Feb Fests and the Wacko races and things here in the community. Um, Snowmobile oval races. The Lions Club was so vibrant. The Twigs, I guess, still are in that respect. Um, where we are now is a crossroads where the next generation wants to and has been stepping up. I look around now, and I'm an old fart, but we've got a young owner in Julie at Melody. We've got a young owners at the Oxbow. We've got O'Connor's. Same folks are involved in our Seminole garage service area. Certainly, we've got Don Rhodes who didn't get to it this last time in operating or reinventing his hotel space down the road. We've mentioned already the O'Briens, who are quite young and just full of energy. And last but not least, the most important perhaps is the Lanes, John Lane and his wife and family, that have invested so heavily in this community. Much of it through borrowed funds, with the hope, with that like youthful zeal that says, look, we're in our 40s. We need to be the ones to step up and make things happen here in the community. And I'm hoping that the community does not stifle them. I think recently some of the votes and some of the activities have done just that. They discouraged them some. We need to turn that corner because we do have young people who are trying their darndest to give a few more jobs to this area. And that's all it takes. You doing it, another one doing it, another one doing it. Before you know it, 20 and 30 jobs. Around here, in a population as sparse as we are, those sort of numbers really tell. And they turn that tide. They turn the local economies around. Obviously, we have reliance on weather. Obviously, we have reliance on the state and national economies to rebound. But you can't wait for things. You have to do these, some of them crazy. You got to do these things in a community and hope they spur the next one.
Yeah. And we also have our very own Casey Morrison with his camp store. Casey's a very, as you say, very driven person, idea-filled person. We have the committee now putting together Pirates Weekend.
Pirates Weekend.
I actually have a meeting about that Wednesday. I have to go meet about that. We're very excited about that. And we do have, there are still a few events, the art shows, the Apple Fest, the farmers market has become bigger and bigger.
It's been wonderful.
Which is very, very good for the local economy.
And gives folks a chance that are entrepreneurs that have other things to offer. Obviously, there's flowers and there's vegetables, but this farmers market, because it is not a traditional farmers market, isn't just for weekly vegetable purchases. You can do that while seeing some unique craft and some unique other food product. Very hopeful that the chamber keeps expanding that. You mentioned the nascent, just getting started things like the Pirates Weekend. I would say the only regret I have in not any longer being in public office is that I did not have enough time to dedicate to Spark, which was a group that really started to get a little traction just prior to my leaving office. That was a Speculator Pacifico Area Regional Commission. And it was all about just these sort of things, events, and raising awareness, raising the if you will the morale of business and young people, so that there's always something good, something to look forward to, something to volunteer for. I'm hoping that those sort of things come back. Single focus things like a Pirates Weekend committee are wonderful, and sometimes you need that single focus to get that event to take. Spark, I'd hoped, would be that sort of mothership to be able to have spoked out many of these sort of things. We do run the risk, however, again, because of the paucity of our numbers, we do run the risk of burning folks out. Because unfortunately, it sometimes is that same 24 people that you tap into for energy. Some have seemingly endless energy. You mentioned our good friend Casey Morrison. Casey and Katrina are just a real asset. I'm hoping they're able to stay and put down roots here. They've had right now a foot here and a foot still back in Northern California. But the camp store is a good first step for what I think they're going to do many good things.
Yep. And then another, I'd like to mention Caitlin Stewart, or now she is Caitlin Sipes.
Right.
I still forget to say that. She is also a big proponent of things such as the Holiday Stroll, Pirates Weekend.
She was one of the backbone people for Spark, and she did not get discouraged when Spark was put on a back burner. The new supervisor didn't see the need to give his energy or any town money towards it. But Caitlin and people like her are usually undeterred.
Oh, she's definitely special. And then Aaron Weaver, of course, also has his own sort of drive, as
He
many
certainly
people do.
does. Yeah.
But
The Historical Society is, very often you see Historical Society memberships are a sleepy little group. But the 20% of the full membership that are active and meet here at our local town museum, they're special, and they all have a great deal of energy and something to add. Aaron, because of his youth, I think more than any of them, and he is both a unique character that I like to see get recognition because they deserve it, in hopes that it will spur even more unique, cool things to do, whether it's Irish Road bowling or cemetery walks or anything else. These are fun things that small communities can do and do well.
yeah, and it's great to see everything come together, and we hope that things do progress towards a more lucrative town and something that people can come back to. Um, do you feel that there needs to be maybe more of like a manufacturing type business, something that doesn't rely on just being here in the summer? As we had mentioned, the summer is important to us. We try to get,
Sure.
but something that would go year round.
I do. Here in the village, it has been a frustration that we have not added more of these light manufacturing jobs. There's been a few plaque factories, etc. But we have award-winning wastewater treatment plant. We have a very underutilized municipal water system. We are a crossroads of two state highways. We are undersold on a light manufacturing industrial park, if you will, Adirondack Industrial Park. We have some sightings, not many. Most of our land, as you know, is state land around us. We don't have an abundance of private property, but we do have a couple of sites that I think would be really ideal for what we're talking about. They create jobs, they get a buzz going, and let's face it, no matter where you produce something, the only things you really need are good communication. We have good Wi-Fi here. We've got good cell service here. Our roads are fine, and our guys do a great job. Highway superintendents, county, town, village, do a great job in keeping our roads clear. So UPS is here every day. So if you were manufacturing widgets, in your neck of the woods, you'd be very comfortable in knowing that you could ship out when product was ready, and ship in when you needed, raw material. Those things are vital. I'm always encouraged. I may sound a little discouraged recently about the tenor of commerce and prosperity here, but I waited on the other night a young fellow who I've known for many years. In his college days, he worked over at Hamilton Lake Lodge. We did a few of his things getting ready for his wedding and his rehearsal dinner some years back. And here he is with his beautiful young bride and two children who have moved here from Connecticut and just recently bought a house and are going to live here year round, simply because he's able to work from home and travel via flying to a couple times a week to the places he goes. He said, I can save on taxes. I can live where I've always wanted to live and still make my living. I think every day we get closer to that, where folks can live here and do what they want, either by working at home off of the same laptop or, in fact, traveling from here on the few days when they have to travel. Uh, it used to seem almost unthinkable, and I don't think it is anymore. So I have hope that we will round out our, we sort of a one-trick pony when it comes to how we do our economy here. You either work in the tourism or tourism-related service industry, or you work for a municipality, either as a teacher or in the town or state or et cetera. So having some other rounded uh, uh, industries uh, to for folks to both work at and for, and maybe to emulate and start their own. These are all important things, and they're every day. I think they get a little closer to maybe being doable.
Hmm. And I'm glad that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a way to do this. What do you what impact do you think the state has with the local community?
Well, certainly, it's a saw that cuts both ways. Uh, the state, on all the land they own, pay taxes. Don't ask for services and pay taxes. That helps your tax base and all of these municipalities and school districts to operate. They don't pay high taxes. Some would say, yes, they do, but if they were to allow more privatization on these same properties, the difference in what would be paid and generated and augured into the economy would be much greater. That's a good point as well. The state provides jobs. The state, through its campsites, provides um, visitors, in a sense, for us to then provide after they provide the site, we usually provide all of the various services needed, grocery, recreation, meals out, beverage, etc. The state has a great deal that they could improve on if they would allow for local governments to be um, more active in decision making about state land use. Certainly, I know this up front in both snowmobile and in lesser uses of hiking, biking, mountain bike, uh, four wheeler, etc. When you hear from on high and you don't get a chance to weigh in, I think you get dissension among folks, and then people start putting up walls. We just need to work with them. Uh, Most folks who live here, I think all folks who live here, are here because of the great outdoors, because of the huge expanses that we have. Few would want it changed. We want them to work with our loggers. We want them to work with our grooming agencies and so on to uh, share back and forth both information and, in many cases, and in the state's case, resources, so that we can maximize our not just our tourism, but also uh, infrastructure issues. Um, we want to expand where and how we do water or sewer. Very often we run afoul of state regulation. We need to drop those things and make them seamless so that the last thing you should have to worry about is that the parent of local government is state. You would never think that your parent would be the impediment in you doing well. And in many cases, that's how it plays out. So it is, as I say, Gary, it cuts both ways. Um, you've seen some of the benefits of state around here, and so have I. I just hope that in the future they will recognize that we are a resource for them.
Yeah, we are a state that has a unique, I wouldn't say problem, but a unique situation where, there's a large expanse of wilderness, but then we also have our neighbors in the south, one of the greatest cities in the world, New York City. And you have Albany, who kind of has to balance both of those.
True.
Um, do you see that that's a unique situation as
Well,
well?
certainly going back to just the park, the expanse you spoke of, this is without doubt, and there isn't any argument. This is the most unique state park in the country. Nowhere in any state in the rest of the union do they have a park facility that both A, is more than half owned by private property owners, be it either timber companies or small private businesses such as ours. That's unique. The size of it, being able to fit the 4 largest national parks in it, that's unique. So there's going to be times when we get it wrong. Your reference to the city is smart because I come from there. I just visited there with my grandkids. Most of us love New York City as the entity that it is. It has very little to do with what we do here. One is truly a concrete neon jungle. We have sort of the real thing. But that said, what happens in a state like this, in most states that have heavy urban areas, is there's a disparity in vote and how you vote and the way you see things. And this, that you can't change the city mouse and the country mouse, the rural guy and the city guy. Those mindsets sort of become generic. I'm just saying that it would be great if the folks who lived on Long Island, where I moved up here from, New York City, Rochester, etc., Circus, if they were exposed more to the wonderful asset that is theirs in a sense, that these woods, come visit us in this most unique state park. I think they would have a much keener ear for us as an asset instead of an us versus them. And what you get every time you get the city voting just for how things affect their subway or their roads or things that are there every day. It's the same here. We have to be cognizant of the fact that how we heat our houses and where we're going to get our firewood, that's not the end of the universe as well. We are a state that has the coolest state park in the country and the coolest city in the country. We just have to learn to appreciate both.
Yeah, they definitely need to come to the place that vacation was coined.
That's right.
Yeah,
good point.
If you guys didn't know that, the Adirondacks is actually where the word vacation was coined to help bring tourism in. So if you're gonna have a vacation, be where the term was coined.
The great camps, right, of the Adirondacks.
Exactly.
Sure.
Is there any last words you'd like to say about our time here, about the town and village itself?
Sure. I'm an eternal optimist, I suppose, so I'm always hopeful that where the place that I love and I live will be prosperous, will go forward and be vibrant. So I do still remain that way. I will say, in parting words for you, Gary, and this new effort, I'm very hopeful that a Wi-Fi radio-based broadcast can help. We live far apart, and with the exception of repeaters for NPR, there really isn't anything that joins us together across these many miles of places like the Adirondacks. And we don't have those. There used to be things like, what do they call it, public service, public outlets, where the community outlets.
Public access.
Public access, where folks could broadcast. I'm hoping that when you show this technology going forward, you and Casey and others, that perhaps our local municipalities will pick up on it and start doing their public meetings this way, so that folks can take part without having to go out on 20 degrees below zero when the roads are a little slick like today. So I think you're on the cutting edge of something important, and I wish you luck, and I thank you for giving me some voice too.
All right, well, thank you, Neil, and come visit the inn at Speculator to meet the gentleman I had been talking to, and we'll get to talk again sometime.
I hope so too.
And this is Gary Reinhardt signing off.